Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of BITSA podcast. My name is David. I'm currently a fifth year Commerce and Information Systems student at the UNSW Business School, and I'm also the president of BITSA. Here with me today, who are co-hosting, I have Rachel. Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a fourth year Commerce and Information Systems student, and I'm also currently IT Director for BITSA.
Sweet, thanks Rachel. For those that don't really know what BITSA stands for Business Information Technology Student Association, and we're essentially a student society within the UNSW Business School. We aim to empower and unite tech enthusiasts. So anyone that's really interested in studying technology or pursuing a career in technology, we just welcome everyone. Our team essentially just runs various events, from social events such as like trivia nights. We have educational events like running course workshops, educating students about different technologies, to professional events where we kind of connect students to our industry sponsors who are leading in their fields in financial services, technology, professional services, and even more. We currently have over 1,100 members, and we are aiming this podcast to be able to deliver content and value to students in a different way that has never been done before. So how this is really going to work is that we'll feature guests ranging from faculty members to UNSW alumni who will come and talk about themselves and any advice they can kind of offer to students out there. Whether it could be working in different industries, study tips, or just advice on becoming more tech savvy. If you're an information systems student or just someone that's just interested in technology in general, I strongly recommend you checking this out. It will be released on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe to our channel at UNSW BITSA, and also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at UNSW_BITSA to constantly stay updated. We're really excited to really start this series, and we definitely have a great guest with us today. Obviously, today our guest is Yenni, so thank you, Yenni, for joining us. For those that don't know Yenni, she's currently one of the lecturers and academic at UNSW Business School and the founding director of the business school Sandbox education program, which she'll be covering a bit later. So thank you for coming, Yenni, and would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Yenni, and thanks for having me today. It's really good to talk to you guys, especially during this isolation time. So looking forward to telling more about information systems and any other things and tips that could help any one of you.
Sweet. Thanks, Yenni. Obviously, to just get started, even when I started at university studying Bachelor of Information Systems, the kind of like the content about information systems and what it really is kind of confused me as well. So I think it would be great for you to just kind of describe what information systems are for the students that are maybe listening in, might want to study it in the future. So that'll be great if you can just give us a definition of information systems.
Yeah, sure. So this is actually one of the most popular questions I get a lot when we do open days or any other events. So potential students and parents would just come over and ask us, what is information systems? So I usually give them a really broad, but I would say non-official definition. So not the textbook definition that you would learn later when you enroll into the degree. But for me, information systems is really about applying information technology to create business value or social value and basically to solve problems. So it is a discipline that we look at how people use technologies to do different kinds of things. And it's really a quite balanced area where we have half of the things that you will learn as part of an information systems degree would be really focusing on the technology side of things. And then the other half would be business. So you would learn about how different technologies could be designed or could work, but you also learn about how to applying them. So it's a field that offers you really a lot of career options. If you wanted to go into basically any industries today, we use technologies. So if you have an information systems degree, it helps you to not just, understand the technologies, but also being able to use them much better.
Fantastic. So you really gave us a great insight into how information systems is kind of that nice overlap of business and technology, and you gave us a little bit of an insight into really the value behind studying the degree. But I wonder if you had anything more to add, just for those who are looking to either study the degree or currently considering to do it as a major, or even studying it right now, but still unclear about the key value propositions of information systems as a degree, and where it can take them. If you had just some thoughts to add there.
Yeah, sure. So I really see, people who have learned about information systems. I think these people are really important, especially today, because we have really a lot of technologies and things are developing really quickly. And we, even when we try to use technologies in our day-to-day, our personal lives and also business context, there's just a lot of questions that people wanted to ask. So like, how do I use, this AI to help me in my job? And the job can be really specific in one context and, related to process or related to value creation or any operations that they are currently working on. So there are a range of questions that people need answers, and information systems professionals, I think they are at a very good position because they are able to understand both sides of the world. So they know about technologies, they know about what technologies would allow you to do and what are the constraints about technology. So it's not just, everything technologies will be able to solve it for you, but we also need to understand the challenges and constraints. And information systems graduates know this really well. And at the same time, they also know about business. So they know about process, they know about project management. You guys learn about, business analysis, you learn about analytics as well. So there are all kinds of business trends and also models and best practices. Those are really valuable knowledge that allows people who are graduating with an information systems degree to be the bridge between the technical side and also the business side. So it is really a very attractive, I think, option for students, even though, sometimes it could be a little bit overwhelming because of, the broad nature of the discipline. But if you see it as an opportunity, it really opens up a lot of options for you. Our students, for example, our graduates, they go everywhere. They go to be, IT specialists. Some of them ended up being really good programmers, but some would be business analysts and consultants. And recent years, we have more and more cybersecurity analysts and consultants as well. So the career options are really broad, and it really allows you to find something that works for you, works for your personal interest and strength and weaknesses.
Yeah, it is a really great degree. I mean, I quite enjoy it a lot, how it gives you that fundamental understanding of both technology and business, which, as you say, can be applied in a whole bunch of unique problems to really create value for different people. Now, you can choose to study information systems either as a degree or as a major. And what are the key differences between choosing to study it as a degree versus having it as a major in your commerce degree?
Yeah, so I think it's really about the proportions that, as I said before, we see information systems, the more common structure is 50-50. So we have 50% technologies and 50% businesses related topics. But if you can work on changing this proportion based on your preference. So if you are taking a degree, a commerce degree, and you are majoring in IS, that means you are having actually less technical side of things. You are moving towards, the business side of things. You take the core courses, obviously, from a commerce degree, and also you would take some courses in information systems, like I think digital transformation, business analysis, and a few other courses. But courses like coding would not be compulsory for you, if I remember correctly. So it's really about the portion that you get, whether you want it to be someone who is slightly more technical or you want it to be someone who is really business oriented, because commerce degree definitely gives you more exposure to different business in terms of industry, in terms of context. You might learn about, finance, economics, and some other, business related areas, but you might get less deep into, programming, designing, mobile application. You can still do that. You can still pick those courses, some of them, but they wouldn't be part of your core courses. So it depending on which part, the two parts, the tech and the business, which part is more attractive and more interesting to you. And then you can decide whether you want it to be slightly more business oriented or more technology oriented.
That's definitely real good advice, Yenni. Obviously, hopefully all the students have been listening out there, because that's definitely a common question I get a lot about, wait, should I study information systems under the major, or should I do it as a degree itself? And I think Yenni definitely provided a great preview of what the actual two big differences are in studying and as a degree, and also studying as a major under commerce. Moving on, if we kind of talk about your journey to being an academic at UNSW Business School, like you've studied at multiple countries. So could you just give us a little bit about your journey to being an academic at the UNSW Business School?
Sure. So actually, it's quite surprising even to myself that I ended up in UNSW Business School, because so I had a computer science degree back in Malaysia, and then I again enrolled in a computer science PhD in Singapore. But it was just a series of events that happened, and I met a really good mentor, Professor Shan, and he was my supervisor back in Singapore. And then one day he just came to me and asked, do you want to go to UNSW? And I never thought of really studying overseas, because I don't really have that financial support to go to, some other countries to study. But I took on that opportunity, and then I came to UNSW. So it was really not part of my plan. I never thought about, I wanted to go to Australia and study there, and ended up teaching there. So it was quite interesting, the journey itself.
What made you choose to study and teach in information systems more than computer science or something else? Because I think UNSW is quite unique, that it has a lot more emphasis, I feel, on information systems. We have a whole degree where you can study information systems, whereas other unis, your options are kind of limited to only doing it as a major or doing a computer science degree.
Yeah, you're right. So I think it's not just about UNSW, but there are just differences around the world. So different universities, they have information systems. Some of them have it part of computer science. So within the School of Computer Science, they have a major or a degree of information systems. And then at UNSW, it is under the business school. So when I was in Singapore, I made the decision to transfer from computer science to information systems. So I did that even before I came to UNSW. And the reason, I think that's related to, how I see information systems is different compared to computer science. So I did a degree in computer science, and I enrolled in it again, trying to do a PhD in it. But slowly, as I get into, researching and working really deeply into some problems related to computer science, I was just thinking, and I get really curious about the technologies that I'm working on as a computer science researcher, or a PhD student. I was working on things like cache memory for CPU. I was coding all day, 5 days a week, and I was just thinking about my code every single day, trying to solve, a bug. And the results that I get would be, this new memory design, perhaps it saves your CPU power for 0.2%. So that's the thing that I have been working on when I was in computer science. And it just got me really curious about how these technologies that I'm designing, or I have designed, how people are actually using it. So I have been in the lab coding for this cache memory, and I did make some improvements, but I can't really see how people are using it, even though we did, simulations to see the improvement that we have made, but those are not real for me. And I was just thinking, maybe I should go into, information systems to see and to learn about how people actually use technologies. And I'm really curious about that. So I just, decided, okay, I would just maybe continue my PhD, but it will be in information systems. And that is when I made that change. And that's before I came to UNSW. And I think that is really something that sort of provides me with a perspective when I'm teaching information systems as well. Because I think it's important today for us to know how people actually use technologies, and that knowledge would help people to design better technologies. So I really see these two fields actually work very nicely together. It's not one is better than the other, but two sides of things. Information systems students and comp science students both have things to contribute to making our use of technologies much better.
It's definitely a great kind of topic that you touch between computer science and information systems, because that's definitely a very common question that I get from students during O Week or whatever the open day we have. They're like, hey, what should I study? Should I study computer science or should I move to information systems? And I know that our students still kind of get that struggle with that, not just entering university, but also when they're in university, whether they should choose one or the other. So could you just, in the student's perspective, why should they do computer science and why should they do information systems? If you can just cover the difference between both, even though you kind of just did, but from a student's perspective.
Yeah, sure thing. So for me, or from my experience as a student in both information systems and computer science, I think for com science, what we were learning as a student is really about developing better technologies, or I would say improving the existing technologies that we have. So we wanted to achieve improvement in, let's say, algorithms or the design of the technologies, and we wanted to invent maybe new technologies as well. But in computer science, the context is less important compared to information systems. So we develop technologies, we spend all our effort and time to perfect that piece, the artwork that we do as a computer scientist. But we basically didn't talk about the context or the potential use cases for those technologies that much. We still do think about it because we don't just develop blindly, just randomly designing a technology, but we didn't focus that much on the use cases, the context, the application. And that is exactly what information systems students are focusing on. So we focus on applying technologies and studying the impact of it. So we wanted to know, let's say someone invented few years or 10 years ago, people invented social media. And when they designed that technologies, they have this one or few goals in mind, how people would use this technology. But really what we see is when a technology is out there with the users, you really don't know how they will use it. I think for Microsoft Teams, for example, when they design it, they don't really have that much of focus on education. I might be wrong, but it's my guess that this is not their priority. So they don't focus entirely to design Teams as an education channel. But recently, people started to use it more. And with COVID-19, obviously more people are trying to use Teams for education-related tasks. And then they are working much more on improving functionalities around this area. So if you are, an information systems student in this context, you would be studying how people are using Teams. You would talk to people like us, so students, academics. You would talk to universities. You would do all kinds of methods to get their feedback, to study how they use the technology, and then you develop this understanding about how people perceive Teams as a technology in a crisis context for education. And this understanding would be very helpful for the computer science students or graduates who are working on implementing new functionality on Teams. So they would be able to say, okay, we would implement, breakout rooms for Teams because more and more people wanted to run tutorials on Teams. This wasn't a requirement before when we designed the technology. But now, according to business analysts who had an information systems degree, they said, okay, people wanted that functionality. So the computer scientists will work on the code, how to make sure that it works, how many breakout rooms is possible to be implemented from the technical perspective.
So basically, if you kind of summarize it, it's information systems, very context-based. I think you kind of say that to us also during our courses. I think when we were studying your course, especially cyber recently, you always say focus on the context when we're asking questions. And I think that's such an important tip to bring up to students, those that are thinking about studying information systems. I think context and whatever the context you're using or how you apply your thinking, I think it's the context itself and the story behind it and where you're implementing is very important. So that's definitely a great tip you just brought up, not just in understanding the difference between computer science and information systems, but also those that are thinking of studying it and that want to succeed in the courses. I think the context and understanding the situation is definitely important. In speaking of information systems, obviously Yenni is a lecturer in a lot of our courses under information systems. Whatever year you're in, you kind of probably been exposed to Yenni's courses such as 1609, 3605 and 3617. And I think if we just start with 1609, could you just give us a brief overview of what 1609 is, what the goal and the objective of the courses are?
Okay, so 1609 is fundamentals of business programming. So it is really, I see it as the first course for people who never done coding before. So it is really an introduction to coding or programming. And in the course, what we really try to do is to sort of show or help information systems students to develop that mindset, the programmer's mindset. Because I think that mindset is really important, even though you don't plan to be a programmer at all. But that problem solving, the logical thinking mindset is what we try to teach in the course. Not so much about the syntax of the language that we use, but really about the process itself. And if we talk about the course in terms of the content that we are going to cover, we focus on Java programming language, and we really go through the basics of that programming language to sort of give students a tool to get started in designing your first program. So the course is really straightforward because a Java programming language is very structured. So you would be learning about different components in that programming language, and eventually you would be able to write really simple programs.
So Java's a relatively high-level programming language. What's the rationale for Java? You talked a little bit about how it's a great introduction into programming to use Java. Java's used consistently throughout other information systems programming subjects. What's the rationale behind Java for all of those?
Yes, so Java as a language is really from an instructor point of view. I think teaching Java is helpful in the sense that it is a very well developed language. So there are a lot of resources out there. There is textbook that basically explains every single thing as part of the language itself. So it really gives the beginners, a structure to work with. So personally, I think Java is easier to learn compared to other languages if you don't have the programming experience. So from my own experience as a student, I didn't start with Java. I learned other lower level languages before Java, and I actually try to learn it myself during my free time when I was a student. So what I realized is the structure, the design of Java programming language really helps me to put everything together. So I get to know, okay, so for a programming language, we have these few components. This is the structure behind it. Here are, 100 examples about how you could use this particular thing in Java. And there's a lot of practice questions that you can do. when you first learn about this language, compared to some other slightly more popular languages today, like Python. So those languages allow you to do things with, I would say, less coding. So it's really flexible. The structure is not that rigid. The requirements are less in terms of implementing a useful or workable program. But those languages, I think you find them really easier to learn if you have the basics. You learn about the Java, the comprehensive version of programming language first before you go into things like R or Python. So, and Java is still being used quite widely in the industry. So enterprise systems, when you work on roles related to software development, you would come across Java quite a lot. So I think that's also the practicality aspect to it.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the Java courses. It's really a great introduction into coding. Very frustrating when you don't get anything right, but once it starts working, it's beautiful. And I agree that for Java, is a lot of support out there, lots of different tutorials you can watch. Stack Overflow, I think, is a common resource for everyone. But from what I've experienced and seen, a lot of 1609 has this reputation of kind of being make or break. Like some people seem to just pick up coding really easily. It comes kind of naturally to them, the problem solving, and they tend to do really well in the course. Other people, even those who are quite academic and quite focused, tend to struggle a lot with 1609. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts as to why that is.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, so I've observed that as well. Even when I was a student, we had the same situation. So some people would find programming, it doesn't matter whether it is Java or any other languages. Some people would just find it quite easy to learn, and some people would take more time and practice to get it right. And I think mainly it is about how you try to learn programming. So I think the main issue that I have seen in students, for example, in 1609, would be they really have this one style of learning, which is you read about things and then you try to repeat or try to summarize what you have learned. So you read, you summarize, or you memorize things that you have learned. So that is the one approach that they know how to approach learning. And that approach is very straightforward. But programming is not that straightforward. So if you work on a problem, let's say there's one programming question that you get in 1609, that question itself can have, I don't know, maybe 20, 50, 100 different solutions to it. So there's no one straightforward way to get to the answers, and then you try to remember the answers or understand the answers and then get it back and try to, summarize it. It doesn't work that way. It works by you breaking down the problems. So you need to take on a different way of learning and different mindset as well. You have to work with the problem, not with the solution. And when we learn other courses, like we learn theories, we learn about some domain related knowledge where you have the solutions. You learn about it, you try to understand it, and it can be applied immediately to another situation because the answers are there, and that's only one or two answers that you can give for that particular question. But coding, you have to sit down with the question and then try to work out a process by yourself. So you have to create a process or step-by-step kind of solution by yourself and think about the patterns behind it. So the solution is not that straightforward and it's not that static, which means it is not as easy for you to just, try to read a lot and understand it, but it is actually something that you should think about the problem itself, think about the way to break down the problem, and even just be really comfortable with the uncertainties and trial and errors, because you need to keep changing the process. You need to modify the steps and work with it until you really get the results. So there is definitely a learning curve for people who are not used to that problem solving process. It's quite intensive in a sense. So it's a change of mindset that students will need to get over to really be comfortable with programming. That's my thinking.
For those struggling students that are kind of find it really hard to change that mindset, they might feel a bit lost as to know even how to break down the problem. They're just looking at it and it just seems so difficult. How would you advise them to start off with trying to break down that problem into more manageable pieces, maybe that they can trial and error with and get somewhere and have more success?
Yeah, it's really just about starting small. I think a lot of us, because I think even for myself, I find that I get less patience as I having like all these things that I can do. So there's a lot of things like we can do today, a lot of distractions and all that. So it's really difficult for us to just be patient with ourselves and then start small and try to really sit with one problem for a long period of time. So to start, right, when you first learn about programming, you really can just use flowcharts, use any kind of diagrams that make sense to you, but break down the problem into steps. Just imagine if the problem is asking you, for example, maybe compute your WAM based on your marks from these 8 courses. How would you explain the steps to do that without thinking about coding at all? Just a normal instruction kind of way to solve the problem. Don't think about the programming language. Don't think about the syntax. Think about how you would solve this problem, the steps, and try to imagine you're trying to explain to some 10-year-old kid, how would you go about solving this problem? So you would then break down the problem in a really simple and small steps that you can implement, and you can translate those steps into code. I think one main issue or a source of anxiety is you start looking at the problem and you think about, oh my God, how like codes that I need to write to solve this problem. But it's really not about the code that you need to write. It is really about the steps that you need to take to solve that problem without thinking about the code at all. And once you have the steps, you would then learn about how to translate those steps into codes. It could be Java, it could be any other languages. But then the translation later is much easier if you have a clear steps and you know exactly what you need to do to solve the problem.
That's definitely a great tip, especially for those students that are struggling programming. I remember when I first started doing our 1609, I barely passed a course because I was trying to rote learn it like all my other courses. And I think obviously starting small is definitely a big tip for those students that are struggling programming, because you just see this question and you're just trying to pull your hair out. You're like, how do I do this? You don't know what the syntaxes are. You don't know what each of the methods or something to do. But I think definitely starting small and actually trying to try the code itself and trying to code it yourself is definitely important. Because please take my advice and don't rote learn it, because you'll barely pass the course, and it's definitely one of my worst courses I've ever done. And I think from learning that, from 1609, I kind of applied that to 2605 and 3634, and I was definitely able to get better marks because I was definitely able to just learn how to code it and just code it itself, and just starting small and being able to understand rather than trying to rote learn everything like my other courses. So yeah, that's definitely great advice for those students that are struggling coding in general. If we move on to your one of the other courses that you started teaching or will be lecturing is 3605, which is our capstone course. And I know Rachel is going to be taking, I know a lot of my other friends are taking the course itself. Could you just give us a lot of goal and objective of what the course itself is and what are students trying to get out of the course itself?
Okay, yeah. So for the capstone course, it's going to be my first time teaching it in T2, and it's just really refreshing for me because you guys would know, I have been teaching all the technical courses, and every time I have to try to explain to students, it's fine, you can do programming, you can do networking, it's not difficult. But this time it's really something that is quite refreshing for me. So the goal of the capstone, it aligns really well with my own belief or philosophy, if you would call it, my thinking about teaching. So I really think teaching in universities, our goal is to prepare students to be an independent, work-ready professionals. So I see the capstone course being really useful in that way, because what you are going to do in the capstone course is really to apply everything you have learned. So everything you have learned in your degree, like the programming that we just discussed, and some other things like business analysis, you learn about requirement gathering, you might learn about design thinking. And in the capstone course, we're going to use your Agile Scrum methodology, which you have learned in 2603 as well. So you are going to apply all these things that you have learned. You are trying to connect the dots. You need to link them together and see for yourself, how are you going to use all this knowledge and skills to solve a real life problem. So we also bring in the sandbox model in the capstone course, but essentially what is happening is we are going to give you real issues that the industry is facing. So the range of issues that we are going to provide in T2, and you work in a team to select one of the topics and try to use all the knowledge and skills you have learned in your degree so far to solve that problem. So the goal is really, one thing is for students to see the value of their learning. So you have been learning, all these different things, different courses, and now you are in your final year. You would finally be able to see, okay, I'm able to do this thing. So I know that I'm good in programming, and I can now do one mobile application that could solve this real problem. Or maybe your conclusion is, I think I have been a really creative person, and throughout my degree, I have been learning about all these project management skills. I have learned about business analysis techniques, and now finally I can apply this to help my teammates to form a really nicely structured program. And so this is really a space for you to apply all the learning and see it for yourself. This is the things that you have learned, and you are able to do things with it. So apply your knowledge. And the second goal is also along the process, when you are learning and when you are working with your peers, the teaching team, industry people, you are going to learn a lot of professional skills that would serve you really well in your career. So things like communication skills, we would have feedback built into the course as well. So you need to be able to give feedback and also receive feedback, which is a big part of your professional life. You need to be able to communicate with people clearly and work on conflicts. You need to be able to present things well, and so on and so forth. So there's a range of skills that you will pick up along the way as you are solving that project, the capstone project. And I think it's a really nice way to sort of finishing your degree off with, because you would ended up with better understanding about your own skills and knowledge, and also you would build more sort of a bridge into the professional life.
Yeah, I think you definitely summarized the course very well, because I remember when I was doing it last year, there was a lot of, like, you definitely touched on the point about connecting the dots with the information systems degree itself. Like, the course definitely itself goes through things like Scrum, which is you learn in 2603, but there's also a lot of teamwork element, which sometimes gets frustrating, because I was like, oh my gosh, you meant to get this done within this timeline, but you didn't. And that's when kind of the professional side goes in, because you end up being able to realize how to handle those conflicts between your teammates to see what if you didn't make the deadline? What's going to happen? And I think it allows you to adapt a lot. And it definitely, obviously from my professional experience, it emulates well, and it definitely shows, kind of provides students a preview of what working life would be like. So I think definitely the course itself provides a good overview of what professional experience is going to be like, but also your application to information systems degree itself. I think in kind of covering, you're talking about the Sandbox education program, and obviously we'll be touching on cyber next, but could you just provide students about what the Sandbox education program is? Because obviously you're the lead in it. And obviously just a sort of flex for Yenni, she's won multiple awards for the Sandbox education program by the by the Australian Computer Society, but also by the UNSW Business School. So could you just give students that hasn't done the course itself, 3617, just a little bit about what the Sandbox education program is, what it is, what your role is, and what students might be looking forward to?
Yeah, okay. So I'll just briefly talk about the program. So that's really something that I created to teach better in a sense. So it traces back to when I had to design that networking and security course. It was 2 years ago, and I have been tutoring the networking course for a few years already, and I know that students are quite afraid of the networking concepts, the technical part of it, and it's normal because when I was a student, when I was learning networking, I also think that I really don't know why I'm learning this. That's really a question that I constantly ask myself. Like, why am I looking at a TCP/IP model? What does this mean in real life? And why am I learning this at all? So that question, I've been observing, or students have been asking me that question since I was a tutor for that course. And then I was responsible for creating a new course, which is new, but it is also a part of it is also the networking course that we used to teach. So I think I really need an approach to engage students in this kind of topic, and also make them aware that these things, they might be difficult, they might be abstract when you are learning it, but they are really relevant to what you are going to do. And it doesn't really matter what you are going to do in your career. I know most of you are not going to be network engineer, but it still relates to what you are going to, do later in your career. So I was thinking, how do I build that gap between, basically bridge that gap between, learning in the classroom and what you are really going to do in your career. So I experiment with a lot of different things, and one thing a model that I came up with, which is the Sandbox education program, is really to work with industry people to identify issues that are related to real life, but also related to the course. So let's say if we are learning about networking, so what are the real life problems that a network engineer or an IT professional would come across, would be working on, that are related to networking? And then we would bring that problem to the classroom, and day one, we wanted students to work on the problem already. So you might not know anything about networking yet because it's first day of a course, but you have a purpose. You know that there is this challenge that I need to solve, and this challenge is not something that some really out of date challenge that we got from maybe a research paper, but it is something that is happening right now in an industry. And there are people coming from the industry explaining to you why the problem is important. So day one, you have a purpose, and along the process, we assist you to learn the knowledge that you need to solve that problem. So it's sort of flipping the learning process from the traditional or the conventional way of doing it, is really introducing the knowledge first. So we teach you chapter 1 all the way to chapter 9, and then we give you an exam, and we say, use the knowledge that you have learned to solve questions in the exam or the questions in the project. But now is really, we didn't teach you anything yet. We start by telling you, this is the problem you need to solve. Think about the things that you need to learn to solve that problem. So we flip that process. And it was initially a model that I use in my courses, and slowly I think more academics know about it, and then we just say, all right, I think it's something that we can work on at a larger scale. So I started the program, and I started it as a platform where I can bring in more industry people, more academics who are teaching different courses, and more students to work together to solve more real challenges, and at the same time also learn about the knowledge that you need and also the skills that you need. So that's really the intention of starting that program.
Yeah, no, it's definitely great to see that it's expanded the program itself, because I was doing my research the other week, and it seems like it's not just in the information systems, the school of system, but it's actually in the finance, the actuarial. So it's actually great to see that the programs expanded to the other faculty, which is great for you and obviously great for the business school itself. Because I think the best thing about the program itself is the actual interaction with industry and its application to industry and professional experiences. Because obviously at times when you learn information systems, it seems like it's very conceptual and very high level, and you're like, how does this really apply to professional experiences, or how would this apply in my daily life? But I think being able to actually talk and do your assignments and work and being able to apply that to a real life scenario, you can actually understand how your course is applied, but also you're actually able to enjoy it more, because when I was doing Sandbox education program, it was a lot different to what I'm used to when I'm doing assignments for IMS. And I actually got a lot more out of it, and I enjoyed a lot more out of it because I'm actually able to apply the professional experiences, the professional work, and it's just more rewarding in general. I think obviously you kind of touched a little bit about IMS 3617, but could you just provide students with just an overview of what the course is? Because I know when I say cybersecurity and networking, some students kind of find it scary because they're like, oh my gosh, cybersecurity, is it technical? But I know having done the course this term, and I know Rachel can relate to it as well, it's definitely a very enjoyable course, and like there's really nothing to worry about. So could you just give us a little overview about the course itself?
Yeah, sure. So the course, yeah, as I said, it was a new course that I designed 2 years ago, to sort of adding the cybersecurity element to the existing networking course, which also means we revised the networking course a lot to reduce the content, and we keep only the relevant content in the new 3617 right now. But what I really think about the course as I designed it, and I have been teaching it for three terms now, or four, is really what I wanted to do is to make students more curious about the technologies that they are using today. So like you guys are digital natives, so you were born with all these technologies, and you just, in most cases, you would, not to say take it for granted, but you don't really think about, oh, how did all this work? So the curiosity may or may not be there. And I think it's something that is a good thing to cultivate among the students, because not only about your use of technologies, but also about how you would contribute back to this industry, the tech industry in general, later in your professional life. So if you are curious about how the internet works, if you are curious about what happens when I send a message through Facebook Messenger, why did the message actually ended up in the other end? How did this all happen? Isn't it magical, like the Wi-Fi and everything? So if students start to stop and think about, why is this happening, and you start to Googling about it, and you want to learn more about it, I think I've achieved my goal in the course. Not so much about teaching you, precisely what is really happening in layer 4 of OSI model. But that's important. That's something that you would use if you are going to the tech industry one day. You would come across OSI model and things like that. But really, my intention is to make students think about technologies, think about their environment, stop and be more curious and try to explore more. And in terms of the learning outcomes or the things that you will learn in the course itself, it's really networking and cybersecurity. but they seem like two different things, and we try to put them together, but they are actually not. So networking, the content that we are going to cover in networking would be technology related concepts. So topics and things you need to know about how technologies, especially the connection and the communication, how they work. And once you understand that, then only you can understand cybersecurity. Because if you don't know what you are securing, it doesn't make sense to try to secure it, right? So you need to first understand the technologies, and then we will talk about the different aspects to cybersecurity, not just the technical side, but also the people and the processes side of it. So really, it's about having a greater appreciation about the technologies that you are using and being a better user. Because if you are able to secure your own use of technologies and people around you, that in itself is also a contribution to the tech industry. So the goal is really to just do provide students with that knowledge and more context and more perspectives to think about technology and use them better.
Yeah, definitely. I think you definitely achieved that through me because we recently got NBN in our house, and they're like talking about all these like fiber optics. I was like, yes, I know what that means. And like they were talking about all these networking terms, and they were just like, oh, we'll be connecting this. I was like, oh, and I was asking questions about NAT and all these things that we learned through cybersecurity. So definitely the course itself, maybe I feel like a lot smarter about networking. I can actually understand what's going on when it's actually hitting my router and what's happening to my internet. Obviously, when I attach or connect my PlayStation to the internet, I'm like, oh, I actually know what's going on. I know what NAT is now. I know what NAT type is. So it definitely helps you appreciate technologies a lot more, like Yenni said, and makes you just feel a lot smarter as well, because I feel like I'm just the smartest person in my house now by understanding all the networking side and just the Wi-Fi and how everything works. So it's definitely a very interesting course, and it's definitely one of my favorite information system course in general. It's obviously talking about the elephant in the room. We're all kind of at home right now, practicing our social distancing due to COVID. And it's definitely affected a lot of industries, but I think education sector has definitely hit the most. Like us having to not being able to see the lecturer or having that physical interaction in our classes. So we just kind of want to cover we just kind of want to cover how it's affected our experience, but also how it's affected Yenni's experience in her teaching overall, and maybe some tips that we can provide in general. But I know from my personal experience, I think COVID's definitely changed a lot. As an extrovert itself, I love going to uni just to see friends and being able to actually learn in class, talk to people. It's just an extra version outside of me. Just love going to uni, but I think that's definitely affected me a lot in being just confined to just virtual interaction. And it's a bit hard. It's been a harder transition to me personally. It's probably going to be the same for Rachel. I'll probably ask about her opinion about how it's changed her teaching experience. But I think for me, it's really about a balance and being able to actually balance your study and just having your own study area and just having your other sleeping area. I think just separating your room into different areas where you can just do your study and also confine your other areas, just sleeping or just being entertaining. I think that's helped a lot me transition into virtual classroom. Rach, I don't know how your learning experience changed or what you're doing to overcome COVID, but could you give us some of your tips and some of your struggles that you've gone through as well?
Yeah, so I'm similar in the fact that I'm quite extroverted. So the part that I love about university is going and interacting with other students and my tutors and lecturers. And so it obviously was quite difficult being at home, especially working in group assignments when suddenly people are a lot less accountable somehow when you're far apart. I think 3617 I enjoyed a lot. I managed to still remain very engaged in that course with the nature that the course was laid out, but some of my other ones were quite difficult, particularly coding, where before it was quite easy to go and I'd either go talk to the lecturer or the tutor and get some help on my code, debugging it and understanding where my thoughts were going wrong. Obviously, that's a lot very different when you're so far apart. It's very hard to get that sort of help, and you might not feel so inclined to reach out and ask for help. But I think generally tutors and lecturers are receptive to help. I know as I was tutoring economics this term, and that was obviously very interrupted because I had a short time of in-person teaching, and then it was all online and the classes were all collapsed. I think everyone was impacted. A lot of people struggled. A lot of students reached out and found that they had a really difficult time, especially for their first course in uni. So I think the major tips again is trying to create those boundaries. I found that everything kind of blurred together. Work, uni, home life was all one, and trying to keep boundaries between them all so that you have certain times for uni and certain times for work and certain times for leisure can definitely help manage it a bit. And then reaching out to your lecturers and tutors when you don't understand, even though they feel far away, they're actually quite close with an email. But enough about us. Yenni, I'd love to hear about how you've been adapting, especially I think a lot of teachers have found this whole experience quite hard because it's totally different from anything with experience before.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for me, it's actually quite a strange experience because I'm super introvert. So I don't really need that, the connections with the physical connections. I don't think I would ever miss that much. But in terms of teaching, I think it's definitely more difficult to teach online. So I still remember my first lecture when we first moved online and I start lecturing, and when I started I realized, oh, it's totally different. You just basically talking to the screen, and because I can't see any of you, so I don't know, there's no feedback, there's no visual cues. I don't know if you guys are nodding or you guys are just maybe not even looking at the slides. I just don't know anything. So my teaching approach is really about observing the reaction of students, and then I would adjust my teaching accordingly. But I can't do that at all. So I can't do that in the online environment. And it's just really challenging in that way. And of course, it gets better as we get used to it. And with all the online meetings that we have, we slowly get used to talking to the screen or video meetings. But I do miss the physical connections or like face-to-face teaching the most. So I really love the feeling of going into a lecture hall and then being able to see the students and then talk to them and get to know them better. And when I was in my office, students would just randomly stop by and then have a chat, and all that are gone. So that's really something that I find the most difficult for me with the COVID-19. But something good happens, like when I was doing online lectures, I think more students actually ask questions, maybe because they feel less scary, in the sense that you only need to type in the chat channel. You don't really need to raise your hand, and everyone in the classroom would just be looking at you and then waiting for you to say your question. But in an online environment, that was much easier. So I got more questions, better attendance from the numbers that I can see, but not so sure if the students are actually there. So those are some good things. And consultation, it's much easier, and students are more likely to actually join. So they would just easily, just join the Collaborate Ultra link and they can get to talk to me. So those are some of the silver linings for this crisis. But yeah, I think overall for me personally, the disruptions is minimal because, as I said, I'm introvert and I really stay in most of the time anyway. So it doesn't really affect my lifestyle, but it really sort of makes me change my way of teaching as well, because being engaging through online or when students can't see me, next level. That's really challenging.
Yeah, interesting to hear from an introvert's experience. I'm definitely one of those students who took advantage of the convenience of online consultation. Previously, I would have only gone for a consultation if I needed urgent help, because you do have to go to campus at those time slots and it's not always convenient, whereas online did reduce that barrier where I could have feedback on exams and things like that quite easily with you, Yenni. So that was fantastic. I really benefited from that. So that's something I utilize to get over the struggles of online learning, the resource that it's now much easier to communicate with you through online learning. Do you have some other advice for students who are struggling with the online learning? Maybe they're finding it difficult to understand course concepts because of the way they're learning it, or they're just feeling quite isolated. What advice would you have?
Yeah, I really like what you just said about, even though the lecturers and the tutors seem really far away, but they are actually just one email away. So that's really something I wanted all students to know, because we are really here to help. So all lecturers and tutors, we are always trying to help the students, and we want to know your struggles as well, because without you telling us, we really don't know what is going on. So we can't help if we don't know, what are, the concepts that might be really difficult to understand, or you might face problems in trying to ask your tutors for help for your coding. I see that in 1609 as well in T1. So those things, I think, just being really comfortable with approaching your lecturers or tutors, because just know that they understand this is happening, and really we are all in this together, right? Even though it sounds really cliche, but we are really in this together. So we understand the struggles that you might be going through, and if you get in touch with us, we will try our best to help, and we can adjust things. We can run more consultation sessions, any kinds of things that could help you. We are happy to do it. So be very comfortable getting in contact with your lecturers or your tutors. And in terms of studying effectively at home, I think for me personally, I really very used to work from home, because maybe the nature of my job as an academic, if I'm not teaching, I would be doing research. So I'm very used to doing research at home, and I'm able to be productive that way. So I think there are a few tips in terms of trying to be more productive or more effective when you are at home. The first thing is really, like you said, Rachel, is to give yourself a structure. So you need a routine. And what kinds of routine is a question that you need to ask yourself after you think about who you are as a student. So I think what is very good in the current situation is most of you, when things were normal, so you guys had a lot of things going on every single day. So your days, I could imagine, I think it would be like full of activities. Like you said, some of you need to work, you need to study, you need to have your social life, you have your student society, like what you guys are doing now. So your days are really, really full, and you might not have the space, the time, or the energy to just sit down and reflect and think about how you could improve your routine, how you could learn better, what kind of person you are. Are you a morning person? Are you most productive after you just woke up in the morning, or you are more productive at night when everyone else is at home, they are just resting, and you have more time and more space for yourself? So try to spend some time to think about how you work, and then structure your routine based on that. For example, I'm definitely a morning person, so I have to structure and keep blocks of time in the morning for me to do the most important tasks. So once I've done with the priorities, I would then have some time to work on those tasks that don't really require that much brain power, for example. So if you structure your day like that, you would make the most out of it and you don't feel that tired. Because I think my own experience, even though I've been working at home most of the time before this, now that I have to work from home every single day, there are still differences. And I still feel like I get tired more easily because there's no, like Rachel mentioned as well, there's no boundary between like, okay, I'm now at work, I will be fully focused, but I'm now at home, I can be slightly more relaxed, but there's no such boundary. So you can create that structure for yourself if you are a person who needs to separate your work and your life. And there are people who work better if they integrate their work in their life. So if you can do that, then you have to set up a structure for yourself to do that. And the second point I wanted to point out is really about making use of the resources that are out there right now. So not just the university related resources, which I think later you guys are going to talk about, but also the additional things that are going on that people are providing, the additional resources. Because I just realized there's just a lot more webinars, a lot more teaching materials, free articles, and things like that people are offering now. And there's just so much more free software, free books, because people know that everyone needs this support and people are offering it. So be really proactive in taking advantage of that. You can sign up to much more events online than you could do when you have to attend a physical event. Just like consultations, you can do it much easier now as compared to you have to come to campus. So there are a lot of events, seminars or webinars people are running today. They're free, and just be very proactive to look for those opportunities and sign up for them, because you will be able to learn much more without all the commute, without all the distractions during this time. So that's really something that is very good to take advantage of, so you can get something good out of the crisis.
Thanks for that, Yenni. I think what Yenni has brought up is definitely important. Definitely about having your structure, but also taking advantage of the online resources, and just in general taking advantage and actually emailing and contacting the lecturers or putting on the Moodle forums if you have any questions about certain course content. Because what I realized was I was a bit scared first year, like asking questions on the Moodle forum, because I just like, wait, am I perceived as dumb? Is this like an easy question? And I was kind of scared of that perception. But what I really realized is that getting involved in those Moodle forums and actually emailing the lecturers, like the correlation between that and my marks are actually very positive. So I think the more you actually get engaged in those forums and the more you actually email the lecturers, it actually helps with your learning and your overall understanding. And it's definitely helped me to get better marks in general. So I think those are definitely great tips that Yenni brought up. And obviously Yenni talked about us kind of mentioning things about help for UNSW students. So if you just type in things like COVID-19 UNSW, there's an information page for students that are just over understanding of what UNSW is doing for COVID-19, but also if there's financial support, different special arrangements. But also we know that it's very tough, like mentally, just physically, and not all of us might be in the most healthiest of mental state. And it's very important for you to take care of yourself and put yourself first before study. And so UNSW has a counselling service. So if you visit www.counselling.unsw.edu.au, you can get counselling service from the UNSW if you're a student. And I think that's just a great way for you to just solve any stress or anything that you have that might deter your mental health. But in that, I'm just going to wrap up and just want to say thanks for everyone for listening. Thanks for listening our inaugural podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed and got a lot out of it. And also just want to thank Yenni for joining us and being our first guest. So I'm just going to virtually clap Yenni. Thanks so much for joining us, Yenni.
Thanks for having me.
All good. You definitely provided a lot of advice, and we're definitely glad that we asked you to be our first guest. So thanks so much for joining. And obviously, thanks for all of you again for joining and listening in. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, UNSW BITSA, and follow us at UNSW BITSA on Facebook or LinkedIn, and also our Instagram page at UNSW_BITSA. Thank you all for joining us, and tune in next time. Thanks guys.
Everyone. Bye.